So 8 months ago, I done a video on who would be the best for each other in the 2v8. That's if 2v8 ever comes to the game. This time I wanted to update that list and update the ideas of who would be perfect for one another in a 2v8 match. For Trapper, I think Nurse would be good for him because if a survivor gets caught in a trap, then Nurse could easily teleport across the map and catch up and down that player. Because really only Trapper could do so much, and I feel like a handful of times if survivors are lucky, they can escape from his trap, meanwhile he already caught them in the trap. So it's like Trapper earns that down, so Nurse could finish the job if that survivor gets caught in the trap. For Wraith, I think Legion would be good. Legion could enter Frenzy and injure as many survivors as possible, and then Wraith could just sneak up on them and then finish the job. Sounds simple enough considering Wraith could only do so much, so Legion would technically give Wraith the head start. For Hillbilly, I think Deathslinger would be the best because Deathslinger could hold them down and then Billy could dash and then down them. Another thing I like about this combo in general is that I feel like they just vibe well together. Like it seems like they can know each other in some way. For Nurse, I think Legion would be great because as powerful as Nurse is, Legion could give Nurse the head start by injuring the survivors, injuring as many survivors as Legion can, and then Nurse could just finish the job like that. So if you have a good Nurse that's guaranteed to injure survivors on first blink, Legion assists greatly for that because, well, the survivors will already be injured. For Michael, I think Dredge would be perfect because when Nightfall happens, Michael could just stalk them and then the survivors may not even know that Michael is there, especially considering Michael could stalk from a great distance. So while Nightfall is happening, he could just build up that evil within 3 and then start downing survivors while Nightfall is occurring. Yeah, these two for sure would be a spooky duo. I can't wait to see this actually come to life on the 7th though, because we should be seeing the lights out mode, so can't wait for that. I think a killer who would go great with Hag is Singularity. I say this because Hag could technically place down her traps and then Singularity could guard those traps in a way. So if the survivors do know where her traps are, the Singularity could prevent them from removing the traps. If the Hag and the Singularity have good chemistry together in the match, I can see this working pretty well because they will technically both be on top of you, because the fact that Hag's traps aren't going anywhere if a survivor is already slipstreamed, and if a survivor happens to run into a phantasm trap, then the Hag and Singularity could kind of put pressure on that survivor. I honestly don't see them being too powerful, but more so just annoying because like they both have potential to constantly put pressure on you, as well as Singularity being able to defend the traps. So it's like if the survivors do tend on removing the traps, they would just get slipstreamed in the process. A killer I can see going pretty well with Doctor is Bubba, because as Doctor is preventing the survivor from looping a certain area, whether that's the survivor trying to loop a window or pallet, Bubba could chainsaw them down. So that would technically be a quick co-op chase. That's if the Doctor is hitting his shock therapy in the right spots though, because it really all depends on him to guarantee the down. I thought a killer that would do good with Huntress is Nurse, because when Huntress hits a hatchet from across the map, or if that Huntress just has good aim in general, Nurse could finish the job by covering that distance and then downing the survivor in the process. So it's like as long as Huntress and Nurse are on top of it, they should get the down in the instant. There's also potential for vice versa because Nurse could teleport and then injure a survivor, and then the Huntress could technically finish the job from a distance by throwing a hatchet. So they could have good chemistry going on there. A killer I thought that would do perfect with Bubba is Deathslinger, because Deathslinger could just shoot them and then hold them down while Bubba just finishes them. Easy 1-2-3 chemistry going on right there. I can see them being really powerful together. A killer I thought that would do okay with Freddy is Clown. I say this because the hinder effect would technically be multiplied because the survivors would be affected from the snares and Clown's bottles, but Freddy and Clown will both have to be on top of it. Freddy placing his snares in the right spots and Clown throwing his bottles accurately. I don't know if they will be the best, but they have some potential. A killer who I thought would go good with Pig is Singularity, because Singularity could defend the jigsaw boxes. So when the Pig does place the trap on the survivor's head and they try to remove the trap, Singularity could defend the Singularity could defend the traps, making sure the survivors don't remove it off their head. I could just see this being really annoying, but it was definitely something that I'll have to try with somebody if 2v8 does come to the game, which I'm sure it will at some point, but I guess only time will tell. A killer who I thought would go good with Clown is Bubba, because Clown could slow them down and then Bubba could potentially get the down, so they have some good chemistry going on there, but that all just depends on placement because the survivor can't possibly get away. But as long as Clown and Bubba are on top of it, they should get the down in an instant. A killer who I thought would go good with Spirit is Legion. Legion once again giving their partner the upper hand and then Spirit just finishing a job. Legion will also give Spirit the upper hand because you need great hearing to play Spirit, and since the survivors are already injured, the Spirit will hear their grunts and moans of pain. A killer I thought who will go perfect for Legion is Twins, because as long as survivors are injured, Victor could keep downing survivors, and since Legion could just keep injuring survivors, that means it would technically be a slugfest because Victor will instead go into Frenzy. immediately. A killer who will go perfect with Plague is Oni. When Plague vomits on survivors, they eventually become broken, meaning they're injured and can't heal unless they go to the pool of devotion. Oni could just collect all their blood while they're broken, filling up his power gauge and making him activate Blood Fury, and if the survivors don't want to feed Oni his power by staying broken, they would just make Plague more powerful by going to the pool of devotion, where she could then activate Corrupt Purge. So it's basically a pick your poison situation, because it's like one of them would get powered up either way. So it's like not only do they have potential of slowing the game down tremendously, it's like you still have to worry about one of them having their power to down you relatively quickly. And then it's like if Plague has a Corrupt Purge and Oni has his Blood Fury, then that would just be a hard time altogether, because a good Oni and a good Plague could down you relatively quickly and chase by themselves. So I can only imagine them working together, so that would just be a massacre in itself. A perfect killer for Ghostface would be Dredge, because similar to Myers and Dredge, when Nightfall is activated, Ghostface could barely be detectable. Probably won't even be detectable actually. So it's like Nightfall would give Ghostface the opportunity to 99 survivors easily, since he's harder to track, marking the survivors and then downing them. So yeah, I can see them working really well together. A killer I think will go good with Demogorgon is Singularity, because if survivors try to get rid of Demogorgon's portals, Singularity could just stop them and slipstream them. If that survivor happens to already be slipstreamed, then the Singularity could just teleport on them if they're trying to get rid of those portals. And then with Demogorgon's portals not being deactivated, he would technically put pressure all around the map. Them two would definitely have annoying chemistry, especially since survivors have to worry about two things to get rid of, that's the portals and the biopods. So I feel like they will waste more time getting rid of the portals and the biopods instead of doing the gens, slowing the game down in the process as Demo and Singularity apply pressure. But mainly Demo, since Singularity actually has to slipstream the survivors. But it's not like that won't be too complicated to do in the first place, depending on the map. So I can see them having annoying and pretty good chemistry together. A killer who I think would go perfect for Oni is Plague. Like I mentioned, they're like bread and butter together. It's basically a pick your poison situation. If the survivors stay broken, they feed Oni. If they go to the pool of devotion, they feed Plague. And if Oni and Plague are both in their prime, then is GG's. A killer who I think will go perfect for Deathslinger is Bubba. Them two are like bread and butter. Their powers together will work perfectly. They would get easy downs. As soon as that Deathslinger hits a shot, you're down. Unless the survivor is probably body blocking from a distance. But it is like other than that, that survivor is getting down for sure as soon as they get shot. Because once that Bubba is nearby, all that Deathslinger needs to do is reel you in, and then Bubba just needs to down you. A killer who I think will go good with Pyramid Head is Pinhead. This is because Pinhead could immobilize the survivor with the chains, basically making them stop for a short period, while Pyramid Head hits you with the punishment of the damned. They will just have to be both pretty close by to one another, and Pyramid Head will have to be close to the survivor, because as soon as Pinhead hits that survivor with the chain, Pyramid Head can hit the survivor. And the fact that punishment of the damned goes through collision and Pinhead's chain also goes through collision, that just makes their chemistry stronger, because it wouldn't matter if a survivor is on the opposite side of a structure. Pinhead could just slow them down with the chains, and then Pyramid Head could just hit the survivor through the collision. And they're both pain lovers, so I could see them being best friends. A killer who I think will go good with Blight is Huntress. If that Huntress has great aim, that Huntress could hit the survivor from a distance, and then Blight could cover that distance and then rush the survivor down. They will have to be a really good Blight in Huntress though, because depending on the map they might have a hard time, but if they are on top of it, I can see them being pretty good together. A killer who I think will go perfect with twins is Legion. They're also like bread and butter. I just think both their powers will work great together. It would technically be a slugfest. Like I mentioned, Legion would just enter frenzy and injure as many survivors as possible, and then Victor would take over and then down as many survivors as he can. I can honestly see that match being a nightmare if both the Legion and twins are on top of it. That's another combo I would immediately try if 2v8 does come to the game. A killer who I think will go good with Trickster is Nurse, because as long as that Trickster could injure survivors from a distance and has good aim with his blades, Nurse could cover that distance quickly and then finish the job, especially since tall structures is Trickster's weakness. So if the Trickster happens to injure a survivor and the survivor turns a corner, the Nurse could just teleport through collision and then down the survivor in the process. So I could see them working great together. A killer who I think will go good with Nemesis is Legion. That's because Legion will injure every survivor, and if that survivor happens to already be infected, then Nemesis just has to one-tap them, making the job easier on his part, especially at tier 3. It's also the fact that you just don't need skill to play Legion at all. Maybe just a bit of skill of being patient enough to hit the frenzy attack for you don't miss it, or just knowing when to end your frenzy because you know for sure you won't be able to catch the survivor, for you could then fill back up your power gauge and then enter frenzy again to then apply more pressure. But it's like if you're a well-experienced killer in general, a frenzy hit is a guaranteed hit, so if that survivor is already infected, then Nemesis just needs to one-tap them. A killer who I think will go good with Pinhead is Nurse. Pinhead would technically immobilize the survivors from a distance while Nurse blinks over to the survivor to injure them, and the fact that both both their powers play into cutting through collision, they could have good chemistry together from that, because even if the survivor is on the opposite side of a structure, Pinhead could just immobilize the survivor and then Nurse could just blink through the collision and then injure the survivor like that. So I could see them flowing pretty well together, whether that's distance range or close range. It would actually help Pinhead out a lot, considering when Pinhead chains you from a distance, it's very unlikely he will be able to catch up to you and hit you, so Nurse will do the job for him. A killer who I can see going good with Artist is Nurse. I say this because if you get hit with a dire crow from a distance and Nurse happens to be pretty close by, that Nurse could hit you while the crows is still on you, and then Artist could finish the job from a distance. Calm's chemistry will have to be on point though, because the Nurse will have to be pretty close to the survivors that's hit with the dire crows to injure the survivor that's about to be down with the dire crows, because Artist could just be on dire crow duty the whole game from a distance. As long as Nurse is keeping up on the survivors that the Nurse knows Artist is gonna hit specifically though. That's why I think it will be better if they on comms, because if that survivor is already injured from Nurse's attack while the crows is still on them and then happens to get down with the second hit with the dire crow, the Nurse could just pick up the survivor and then hook them right there. Artist doesn't have to do that because she's not by herself, so she doesn't have to worry about going across the map to pick up the survivor and hook them, because Nurse already do it for her. But like I said, the chemistry has to be on point though. Sadako and Legion I could see being the pain. Similar to Wraith, Legion could give Sadako an easier advantage by the survivors already being injured by the frenzy, and since Sadako would be demanifested, she could sneak up on the survivors and then finish the job. Alternatively, what makes their combo better than Wraith and Legion is that they have the potential to continuously apply pressure. Legion could keep hitting survivors with frenzy as Sadako is keep transporting around the map and condemning survivors. If they both keep that pressure up in good fashion, the survivors will end up becoming fully condemned whilst they're already injured, giving Sadako a much easier advantage since she will have to just hit them one time and then hit them with the stair to kill them. So I could see them having unexpectedly good chemistry together. A killer who I think will go perfect for Dredge is Michael. They're also like bread and butter. Nightfall will help Michael tremendously, considering survivors won't even see if Michael is staring at them, and since he has great stalk range, he could just stalk the survivors from a distance and they wouldn't even know, filling up his evil within 3 in the process. Once again, spooky duo. A killer who I think will go okay with Wesker is Legion. Legion would give Wesker a huge head start by already having the survivors injured, so Wesker could just finish the job by dashing at them. It would have to be a god Wesker to really have an intimidating duo, just for chases could end really quickly. A killer who I think will go good with Knight is Doctor. Their duo will be better with comms though, because as the Doctor is chasing the survivor, the Knight could send out a guard to that survivor that the Doctor is chasing, and if that guard detects a survivor, the Doctor could stop a survivor from rolling the window or dropping down the pallet or rolling the pallet, making the guard hit that survivor, and then the Doctor could possibly follow up. If that survivor happens to already be injured, then the guard would just get the down at that point. This is another duo I'm oddly curious to try. I feel like it could lead to great moments. I honestly don't know who would go perfect with Skull Merchant. This is the only killer I'll let y'all decide who will go good with Skull Merchant. A killer who I think will go good with Singularity is Pig. Them two are like bread and butter. I just feel like the chemistry would be really annoying because Singularity could constantly defend the jigsaw boxes, making sure you don't get the trap off your head. It's like, yeah, the survivors could just get an EMP and disable the biopods, but that just adds an extra layer to taking the traps off your head. And then would it help if you already slipstream, because Singularity would then just put pressure on you. I just feel like them two together have perfect potential to slow the game down, or maybe even get a survivor or two out the game quickly. A killer who I think will go good with Xenomorph is Demogorgon. You have two sci-fi creatures right next to each other, which would be perfect. But not only that, them two together could just apply constant pressure, because Demogorgon places portals around areas that don't happen to have a control station nearby them, and for places that already do, the Xenomorph would just go through that. So I could just see them constantly moving throughout the map, applying pressure on survivors and eventually getting downs together. A killer who I think will go good with Chucky is Legion. That's because Legion will already set the survivors up, injuring them, while Chucky could easily down them with one dash, making it easier on his part. They could also both vault pallets and windows, so I could see that playing a pretty effective part in some areas, because for Legion it's technically a guaranteed hit, and then Chucky could just go over anything and then hit you from there, depending on the right positioning. I could also just see that being a fun time too, just vaulting windows and pallets together, injuring survivors. Sounds like a fun time. A killer who got the most picked depending on my list, that being the most cooperative killer to pair with, is the Legion, who could potentially have good chemistry with 8 killers in total. I mean, it makes sense because Legion could already just set the killer up by already having the survivors injured. So depending on killers who are already good at injuring survivors and chase pretty quickly, or just in general, the fact that they already injured from their frenzy attack, that helps because the killer who finishes the job does less work, considering that survivor is already injured. Anyways, who do you guys think would be the best killer duo in the fog? If 2v8 happens to come into the game and be exactly what we think it is, let me know down below. Love y'all. Take care. I'm gonna see y'all in the next one. And peace.